In this tutorial today, we'll be painting a layered garden scene made up of different objects, including plants, bees, a watering can and tools. This is a nice introduction to scene building and drawing and painting layered objects. The supplies you'll need are the Viviva colour sheets, watercolour paper, a sketching pencil, brushes, water, a waterproof fine liner and some white drawing ink. You can of course substitute any of the supplies for ones you already have at home. We're going to start by sketching everything out and drawing a circle. For this step you can freehand the shape or use a circle object such as a plate or a box lid to trace around. This circle will act as a background for the scene and will help to anchor all the objects later on. As this is a layered composition, the object at the forefront of the scene will be drawn on first. Beginning roughly in the middle of the circle and overlapping the bottom circle line, sketch out the seed packet, and then we will work from front to back, adding in objects on either side of the seed packet, making sure to draw the bottom line of each object a bit behind the previous one. This will allow the cluster of elements to look as if each one is sitting behind the one in front. It is often a good place to begin by breaking down each object into simple shapes and then filling in the details afterwards. When drawing the bees and butterfly in the top of the illustration, make sure to vary the size and placement of each, as this will help to make the whole scene look more organic. Now it's time to outline the drawing and trace over all the pencil lines with a waterproof pen. If you don't have a waterproof pen, you can always outline the drawings after the painting step. In this scene today, I did not outline the circle background as I wanted a lighter effect. After the first layer of outlines are complete, you can rub out the pencil lines, and then as an extra step, you can go round the outside lines of the entire scene once more to bulk them up a little, especially along the base of each of the elements. For the painting portion, I pulled out the watercolour palette and began by mixing up a light blue by combining a little bit of pigment with clean water. It's important to remember that these paints are highly pigmented, so you only need a tiny amount of the paint on your brush, and you can also have a second palette handy for mixing the colours with water. Using the paint, I then filled in the background, working quickly and overlapping my strokes to create a smooth as possible effect. However, as watercolours can shift as they dry, it is possible that a few streaks will naturally appear. Once the background is completely dry, it was time to colour in the objects. The painting technique today is quite simple. Each object starts with a flat layer of colour, mixing up a little bit of pigment with water, and sometimes mixing different colours together on the mixing palette before applying the paint to the paper. I like to move about when painting, jumping all over the page from one section to another. That way the colours can dry and it avoids these sections bleeding into each other. If at any point you do end up with a mess, you can dab off the excess paint with a paper towel, let the area dry, and then add a new layer of colour afterwards. After the first layer is dry, we can now add in the shadows. For this step, I am laying down strips of corresponding darker shapes into each section, especially paying attention to where the objects are overlapping each other as the objects behind will have a slight shadow along that line. If you want a smooth blended look, then you can blend out the shadows with a little clean water into the background colour. For the most part here, I wanted a stronger effect, so most of the shadows are unblended, and each object has 2 to 3 layers of shadows built up. When adding in the shadows, it's often a good idea to start out with a lighter colour instead of going in straight away with a really dark shadow, and that way you can build up the layers until you reach a look that you're happy with. The next painting step was to add in some splatters. I mixed blue and green pigment with some clean water on my palette. This is also a good way to use up any leftover paint that you have from painting. And then I tapped my brush against another brush to flick the paint onto the paper. This can be a messy process, so you might want to cover up your desk with scrap paper first, or take the painting outside to do this final step. After everything is dry, the finishing step is to go in with the white ink and add some highlights. If you would prefer a more subtle highlight, you can use a white coloured pencil instead, as the marks will be less opaque. Or you can try white acrylic paint or gouache and water the paint down with a little water before adding it to the painting. Or you can leave out the highlights altogether. This step is useful for fixing any little mistakes and cleaning up the edges of the objects, especially if you went over the lines when you were colouring. You can also add some white splatters into the background as well. And there you have a little garden scene. Thanks for watching and happy painting!